Alright, we're in the shop here today because we've got kind of a fun project for you. This is a Disston D-42. It's a hand saw that was produced during World War II, and it's what they call the Victory Saw. You can see that they have the Morse code symbols for victory as part of this eagle and V crest. The medallion and nuts would have been steel instead of brass. And kind of distinctive is the walnut handle instead of apple, which wasn't available at the time, or for some of the really early models, the rosewood. The saw is actually relatively sharp. It has a lot of scale rust on it, and it's also got a large crack running through the handle here. So we will be restoring the saw today, and we are in the shop to go ahead and address the issue of the handle. So I'm going to break this saw down. Saws are interesting because they were only produced for a few years during World War II. The D-42 and D-43 both featured walnut handles. They had the V with the eagle along with the ... dash, which was Morse code for victory. The hardware on these would have been walnut handle with steel medallion and nuts, as brass wasn't really available at the time, as well as applewood or rosewood for the handles. You can see with this handle there's a large crack running through it. That'll be something we have to repair, and we're going to go ahead and do that. We'll clean up the handle and we'll use some wood glue and clamping to keep it. Taking the saw apart, we're going to do a good job of being really careful of lifting those medallions and the nuts out. You want to make sure that you're not damaging the handle further. This process can be a little bit hard sometimes because they might want to free spin, in which case you have to be a little creative about putting pressure either on the nut or the bolt in order to hold it in place. When you actually get these all out and you go to remove them, one of the things you can do is, if they're kind of stuck in there, is you can gently tap the nut side of it using a mallet, and that'll pop through on the other side. You want to make sure though that if there's a heavy amount of varnish or glue or anything like that that's attached to the other side, it doesn't split the wood when you do this. So a good idea is you can run a razor around the edge of the bolt or the medallion to free it up. Once those are done, you want to go ahead and pull them out. As you can see, one of them is pretty stuck here, so we'll do it again. If you notice, I'm going to use my thumb. I'm going to lever that to protect the top of the saw handle. As I move it back and forth, the thumb is stopping me from cranking against the very top of the handle, which can cause it to split. So you can see as I'm working it back and forth, I'm keeping that thumb there to protect the handle as well. It takes a little bit of practice and it takes a little extra effort, but it's better that way. Whenever I pull a handle off, I like to look at it and see if there's any new holes drilled in it other than what's necessary for the handle. That might tell you that it was a replacement at some point. Also, you can look and see if there's more than one fade line. We're going to inspect the handle again, make sure the crack doesn't actually go all the way through. Sometimes once you pull a handle off and it's not bolted on the saw anymore, you'll notice other damage that wasn't present before. This one just seems to run almost most of the way through. It doesn't appear to go all the way though. So just using some sandpaper, we're going to clean this up. You'll notice most of the finish and varnish on this handle is gone. So I'm going to use a screwdriver in order to do the curved portions. It's important that you get as much of this off as possible. It can take quite a bit of work, but a little bit of patience goes a long way. So you can see at this point we've got it all sanded down, including inside the handle. We're going to go ahead and clean up this edge a little bit. It's got some chips taken out of it, so a little sandpaper on that as well. You're going to notice that in the wheat carving here, you're going to get a lot of buildup. Using a screwdriver, I'm just going to scrape these out and clean out all that varnish that's in there. Okay, we're going to apply some glue to the outside edge of this crack. Now, because we can't open this up very much, it's going to be hard to get that glue in there. So we're going to use a thin scrap of wood to go ahead and take the glue from the surface and force it in the crack. We're just going to keep moving this back and forth. See, it's pretty tedious, but you can drag the glue in there and you can push it through with a thin scrap of either metal or wood. In this case I have wood shavings that work pretty well. And you're just going to repeat this process, and what you're going to look for is you're going to look to make sure that you get the glue to the center of this. So if you can't see in the crack, you're going to check the other side, and you'll see occasionally as you push more and more in there, if you squeeze down on it like you're clamping it back together, you'll see it squeeze back out, and that'll give you an idea of how much is in there. We're going to apply a clamp to it this time, and we're going to let it sit overnight and let the glue dry up. It's a good idea to clean out all the excess glue around it while you can, so including in that wheat carving. One of the things I like to do is just use a little dental pick and clean all of that out. It saves cleanup time later. It's dried overnight. We're going to go ahead and unclamp it. This time we're going to see how well that glue held for us. It's important that you keep an eye on this, and especially if it's humid out. The glue can be pretty soft still. So looking at it, that crack, it's no longer really visible. The glue's held up pretty well. We're going to keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't start to separate. Sometimes the handle will warp, and that acts as a spring and tries to pull it apart. In this case, it seems to have glued up really well. I'm going to go ahead and use some sandpaper, clean it up a bit, and we'll get ready for staining. This handle is interesting because the top of the handle itself is lighter than the rest of the handle. This happens when it's left in the toolbox that's exposed to the sun. I'm going to go ahead and apply a couple extra layers of dark stain to the top of the handle to try to get it to match a little bit better. I'm not particularly worried about it. I enjoy saws that look like they've been used and had a good life, so if it doesn't get too dark, I'm fine with that. We're just going to go ahead and follow the instructions on the container of stain, and we'll go from there. One trick I like to do when staining is with the wheat carving. I like to do it extra stain in there. So I'll fill it pretty full of stain, and I'll let that sit in there. I'll clean the excess off the surface. And what that does is it tends to make the wheat carving itself darker. It makes it really pop on the saw, so you can see it a lot better. Sometimes you get a lot of gunky things in there. Sometimes maybe they didn't get a lot of stain to begin with, and you can see a discoloration. This way I get nice even wheat color, the wheat carvings that are even in color. I like to use a putty knife with rounded corners on it to remove surface rust on most saws. It's a pretty quick and easy way to do it. And as long as those corners are rounded, it won't really dig into the saw blade itself. As you can see, just a quick few passes and it lifts a lot of that scale off. This saves a lot of sanding and avoids having to use chemicals. I will usually wind up sanding anyways, but a lot of times you can get 90% of the rust off the saw blade itself just by using a simple putty knife. A lot of people use paint scrapers that use a razor blade in them. That's fine as long as you round those corners. Otherwise, you'll wind up leaving gouge marks in the saw blade. With most of that rust already taken off with the putty knife, I'm just going to go use some Windex, and I'm going to use a triple-aught Scotch-Brite pad, and I'm just going to gently run it over. And I'm not trying to really push down and really dig in. All I'm doing is rapid passes with a light, even amount of pressure, and that's going to go ahead and take the rest of that rust out. It's important that you do go gentle with this because you can remove quite a bit of material over time. So again, nice even pressure, and you're going to go ahead and do some passes and then wipe it clean and keep going. I usually go until you can start to see the rust in a kind of a slurry. At that point, you go ahead and wipe it off, and that way you're not digging that rust further into the pits and things. There's some areas that are tougher than others. You'll notice with the teeth, the Scotch-Brite pad works pretty well because you can go over the teeth in the forward direction of the cut, and that stops you from tearing up this Scott pad. It also protects your fingers too, but anytime you're working around the teeth of the saw, you want to be really careful. If you try to go back against the saw, you'll wind up tearing up that pad. I don't really recommend sandpaper when you're doing teeth just because you can take a lot of material off and not get good results. You'll notice there's a couple areas that appear brighter than others, and that's just where I put a little extra pressure in there to get out some of the deeper rust. And what will happen is we'll go back over that with some light sandpaper to go ahead and clean those up. Alright, we're going to flip the saw and just repeat the process over again. You'll notice this side has a little bit more rust along the teeth area, but again, it cleans up fairly well, and nice even light pressure, and just continue to apply some Windex and wipe, and that's all it's going to take. Be really careful and make sure that when I'm working around the teeth that I'm moving in that forward direction so I'm not tearing up the pad and being protected with my fingers. Alright, the saw plate's finished. I didn't do anything special to it at this point. I might go back later and add some bluing agent to go ahead and make the edge come out a little bit more, but I didn't remove much material. So I'm moving on to polishing the medallions and nuts, and then we'll go ahead and reassemble this saw. See, I'm just going to use a little bit of Brasso, and again, nice and easy. Since these are stainless steel nuts, they do have a little bit more rust and pitting to them. They're not necessarily just tarnished as you would see with traditional brass nuts. But again, a little extra work in there, and it turns out pretty well. Alright guys, here it is. This is our finished Victory Saw, our D-42 from World War II. The saw blade itself turned out really well. Again, we used that putty knife to go and scrape off the surface rust, and then just a good job cleaning it up with some Windex and a Scotch-Brite pad. The etch itself is very visible. You can see the D-42 and the eagle with V for victory. We did a really good job of saving those. The handle itself is in great shape. Where we glued it, it glued really well, and the seam's not even visible anymore. You can see the slightly lighter area that we were staining on the top of the saw. You can see where we cleaned up the medallion and the nuts, those being the steel ones. And we did a good job of cleaning out all the wheat carving, so those stained really well, really dark as well, which is nice. It's a really fun saw to work on. It's great to save a piece of history like this, and you don't get to see a lot of these Victory saws. So I sure appreciate you joining me on this adventure, and I can't wait to do it again.